Hey there and welcome to another PSD Tuts spoon-fed Photoshop tutorial. I'm Gavin Steele and I'm going to be taking you through James's how to manipulate smoke to create a hyperreal image. And we're going to scroll down and have a look at our final image, and you can see we've got this kind of skull coming out in the smoke from the cigarette, generally quite stylized photograph. And we're going to make use of using the warp tool and playing around with some blending modes and using quite a bit of stock for the smoke. Laid out really clearly in the tutorial, and I've seen this effect used plenty of other places, and I really liked it, and I really wanted to give it a go. So luckily we have it here. There's a picture of the smoker. We've got the skull and all of the stock there, and it should be pretty easy for you to find your own smoke and images of a smoker and so on to apply this. I apologize in advance even for any of the noise in the background. I've got a bit of construction going on outside, but unfortunately nothing I can do about that. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load up Photoshop, and I've got the smoker file here. I've actually got my skull layers already here, but they're not on, and I'm going to take you to that file now and just take you through that. So the first thing you need to do is open up the smoker file and then go to the skull and cut it out. And again, I just used the pen tool. I went around all the edges. It doesn't have to be exact, but try and be as close to the edge as possible. And then I made a selection of that by right-clicking after I completed my pen path, converted it to a selection, and then created a new layer. Command J, put that selection onto its own layer, and there you can see. Now we've got some stuff on here that we are going to want to get rid of. We're going to want to remove these springs and bolts and this big broken skull part across the middle. So that's how I got isolated the skull, and then I placed it onto my canvas. So let's just zoom in a little bit, move this up, and make sure we can see what's going on. So with that layer selected, I can move it around. I haven't resized it or anything yet, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, Z on the keyboard, to this area here, and then I'm going to grab the clone tool, and we're going to clone out this area here. So I'm going to alt click on just to the side about here, and then just paint away, and just keep selecting different areas that closely resemble the kind of colors around here. Okay, and now with this particular tutorial, it doesn't really matter too much about all the details, because we're actually going to lose a lot of them when we come to creating the smoke from the skull. Obviously, if we're using the skull in another way and we wanted to see all of the bone texture and stuff, you'd be a bit more precise with this, but I'm just getting rid of all of those bits, the screws and bolts and whatnot. You could even get rid of these marks if you wanted to use it for another piece, but for now, that's okay. And you do exactly the same with the bolt and with the skull. So I resized it after I cut it out, and I flipped it horizontally, and I'm just going to finish off now cloning out the skull part across the middle, the break in the skull. So back to the clone tool on that layer, increase the size of my brush just a little bit, alt click, make sure you don't bring in the skull with you. Brush just a little bit too big. Spacebar lets you move around while you're using the tools. Alt click again. Okay, and then let's zoom out and have a look. Okay, still a couple of bits in here which are quite circular over here, so just going to go back to get back to our clone tool, and then with the clone tool selected, just going to make the brush a little bit bigger, and just going to select an area. And instead of running it along like that, all I'm doing is I'm just pressing. So on a mouse you can just tap. And it should hopefully just get rid of some of the circular parts. Like so, that's not too bad. And we zoom out, and you can still notice it because I've been pretty quick with it, but that's pretty much our skull cut out and ready to use. So I'm going to rename that layer. I'm going to call it skull. If I can spell. Okay, and then zoom out and let's just see where we've put that. It's just to the left of our smoker. The smoke's going to be coming up from the left here, and it's going to form, and then it's going to escape at the top of our canvas. So if I zoom out so we can see the whole canvas, we still need a little bit of room at the top to let the smoke escape, and obviously a gap between the cigarette and the jaw of our skull. Okay, so once we've done that, the next thing we need to do is we need to bring in our first bit of smoke, and that's the one with the cigarette on it. So I'm just going to quickly bring all of those up, bring that one in. And we're going to be using this to connect the cigarette to the jaw of our skull, but we just need to get rid of the actual cigarette from the scene. So again, I'm just going to clone it out, fairly big brush, Alt select the black. You could mask it out if you wanted to, but I'm just going to use the clone tool to make sure we get this black color. Okay, and then a little bit of care. If we zoom in, we can see the smoke actually just lifts off the tip of the cigarette anyway. So S on the keyboard, back to the clone tool, Alt select, and just going to go up to that line, like so. So fairly quick process this. And again, it means that if you ever see any stock that has a cigarette in it or anything, you can just, get rid of the parts you don't need. And then keep all of these good bits. Okay, that looks pretty good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So V on the keyboard, we're going to move it onto our canvas. And then I can minimize that, save it, and use it later. So we've got our first bit of smoke on there. We've cloned out our cigarette. We've got it on our new document. Let's give it a name, and let's call this Cig Smoke. So I know this is the one that came from the cigarette. We're going to set this to, on our blending modes, we're going to set this to screen. That's going to get rid of the black layer. And then we're going to burn any harsh edges that may have been left by that. So again, Z on the keyboard, let's zoom in and have a look. Now V on the keyboard, we're going to move it around. You can start to see these edges up here where the smoke hits. So if we grab our burn tool, and I'm going to just increase exposure to 100% for now, and I'm just going to burn off these edges. And what that means is we're just darkening the edges right down to black. So if you've got a soft brush, it'll kind of get a fading kind of look to it, like we've got here. See if we've got any other hard edges. So V on the keyboard. Nope, didn't touch there. We've still got some hard edges there. So let's bring that up. Back to our burn tool, O. I'm going to go to highlights and get rid of any of the highlights up here. And and then to the shadows. Just to darken that right down. Okay, and then we're going to hit Command T and we're going to scale this so that it fits into that gap between the cigarette and the jaw. So I think I'm going to come down to about 27%, rotate it, just roughly get it into place, hit enter, and let's zoom in on the tip of the cigarette. Now still with our Sig Smoke selected, Command T, and I'm just going to rotate it, move it up just a touch, and then nudge it with the arrow keys so we get something like that. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit enter, zoom out, let's have a look. Okay, it is pretty good, but because it gets so wide at the end, it's not going to leave as much room on the edge. We have to move the skull over. So I'm going to zoom in once again, hit Command T, just shrink it down a little bit more. We're going to have to rotate it a touch, bring it back down a little bit more. And let's zoom in so we can nudge it about a bit. In fact, it's pretty spot on. That looks pretty good. And then it comes up to the jaw here. We'll deal with that a little bit in a minute. But that looks pretty good. So all we've done there is we've cut out our smoke, cut out the cigarette from the smoke, set onto screen mode. That gets rid of all the black, leaves the white, burn the edges down, and we're going to apply a little adjustment layer in a second to the levels, and just to tie it in with the overall color that we're going to be using. So we're going to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Levels, and we're going to set that, let's make sure we can see it, set that to 5, 1.4, so 1.04, and 243, and then hit OK. And it's just going to make a slight little change to the colour of that smoke. And that's the first bit of smoke done. Okay. We're now going to work on the skull. So we're going to zoom back in just so we can see our skull. And we're going to play around with the levels on our skull. So we're going to go to Image, Adjustments, Levels. And we're going to set the levels for our skull to be 0, 0.30, and 255 is fine, and click on OK. We're then going to zoom in on our eye, and we're going to clone out this dark shadow. So again, S on the keyboard is going to bring that up, reduce the size of the brush, and we're just going to slowly clone out this area. Okay. So we get something like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Then we're going to desaturate the image, so we can do Command Shift U. We'll desaturate it. And if you zoom out, we haven't desaturated everything else. We've just done it to our skull layer. And then zoom back in. And then we're going to apply the main filter, which is our glowing edges filter. So we need to go up to Filter. We need to come down to Stylize, Glowing Edges, and hopefully you can see all of this. I'll just move it over and up a little bit. Let's move our skull into place. Got most of the teeth there, yep, that looks pretty good. So again, set the edge width to 2, 10 for the edge brightness, and 15 for the smoothness. That looks pretty good. And we're going to click on OK, and Photoshop does its thing, and you can start to see where we're going to go with this. So there's our edge filter applied, our glowing edge filter applied to our skull. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get this little join down the bottom just to tie in a little bit better. So we need to zoom in, like so. We need to come up to our Sig Smoke layer, grab the burn tool, O on the keyboard. We're going to set the midtones down to about 37, something like that. And we're going to soften where it meets the skull. So it's going to bring down, bring down the size of the burn brush here. Okay, like so. Now the next thing we need to do is we're going to actually, I'm just going to come back a couple. We want to leave a couple of traces just coming over. So I'm going to increase the size of the brush. We just want to see those wisps there. Okay, then we're going to bring in smoke number 2, which is our black on white layer. Now we need to invert that. So Command and I, or Control and I on the keyboard is going to invert that. Turn our blacks to whites, whites to black. V on the keyboard, and we're going to drag that in. And we're going to zoom out. And we're going to bring it above our layer style there. V on the keyboard, and we're going to place that up the top. And what we need to do with that is we're going to dodge down our highlights by 18% just down this right hand side just to get them to stand out. So I want to see all of that in the window. We're going to come to dodge, set on highlights, and again set to 18%, and we're just going to do a couple of passes down this right hand side. Like so, that looks pretty good. Set the layer to screen, and then we're going to duplicate that layer, Command J on the keyboard, going to turn that other one off, and then we're going to transform and resize it. So Command T, and do Shift and Alt, and just scale this right down, bring it over the side of the face, and then let's zoom in and start to work on our skull. So this first bit we're going to use to try and get maybe the shape going around the edges of our skull, maybe something like that. And all we need to do is Command T again. We need to right click, go to warp, and we're going to start to play around with how we warp the smoke to fit the shape of the skull coming round here. Like so. Okay, then I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to apply that down the right hand side of the face. And at the minute it all looks messy, but don't worry too much about that. Okay, now I'm happy with this part up here, but I'm not happy with around the eye. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to just bring it up in size a little bit. I'm going to move it up the head, and again transform, right click and warp, and it is going to take a little bit of time just to get this how we want it. Okay, that looks a bit better. Gonna hit enter. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Once we've done that, we're gonna go back to our burn tool. And we're gonna select our midtones, and they're down to about 37 again. And we're gonna look at these hard edges. Just gonna get rid of them. Like so. Okay, we're going to keep using this piece just to come down the side of the face. So I'm just lightly just going to get rid of these pieces down here. We'll just keep that edge. V on the keyboard, Command J is going to duplicate it, V, Shift, and just nudge it down. And now we're looking, coming down to our chin. Rotate it a bit. Okay, right click, warp. Gonna bring that jawline just up like so. We're looking here. There we go. Down just a bit. Hit enter. Again, make sure you hit O on the keyboard for your midtones, and we're just going to get rid of, again, any hard edges. Like so. And I'm just going to attack the highlights a little bit. Again, similar exposure. Just don't want this quite so sharp. Coming through there. Go back to midtones. Okay, there we go. Come back to this, we'll just take out a little bit of our middle part there. That looks pretty good. Okay. And again, I'm going to duplicate it and flip it this time horizontally. We're going to come up the left hand side. Right click, warp, and again just start to bring this over. And I'm actually just looking at this left bit here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So we're going to cut the sides. Again, back into your burn, midtones. Go into the highlights, attack some of those. Okay, and again, we just keep building up as we go around the top of the skull. Going to duplicate that first one. Move that over. Flip it. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be flipped, but I think, yeah, we're going to use that natural curve anyway, so. Okay, back into the midtones. And then the highlights. And that's starting to look good. We're getting a little bit of shape of the head. We don't want too much of it. I'm going to come back down to this one and just clear the teeth a little bit. Okay, we don't want to close off the top of the skull. We want to look like it's forming a, forms a skull and then just like kind of breaks off at the top. But that looks pretty good for that smoke layer for now. Okay, let's move on to the next bit. So we need to use smoke 3 now, and that's to create the smoke breaking away at the top. Okay, actually before we do that, I'm just going to come in and do a little bit more detail work around the nose and these eyes area, the eye areas. I want to give the impression that some of the smoke is actually coming away from these really bright white areas. So if we Command J and repeat that, duplicate that layer again, V, I'm going to move it over, and let's have a look. No. Let's undo that. Let's grab this one. Yeah, it's got a little bit. I didn't quite desaturate or blend out all the whiteness. I just want to pick up these areas here where it looks like it's breaking off the nose maybe. So I'm going to scale that right down. Flip it. And just play around with positioning this. Maybe even taking it all the way back. And I'm just looking at all the little flicks coming off, trying to make them look as if they might come off from the teeth, or even if we moved it to the eye, to give the impression that they're rising up from the eye. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to grab the eraser, a nice soft eraser brush, and still looking at this area here, just going to slowly just get rid of that. I'm going to duplicate it. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's look at some of these other areas, maybe try and get something for the eye. So again, Command J, V, let's bring that over here. Okay, I like this little bit of flick coming off. So I'm going to scale it so that it fits in. Lock that. Okay, grab the eraser. And again, those flicks kind of look like they're just coming off from the eye area here. Duplicate them. Then I'm just going to burn the midtones in them, and the duplicate, and attack some of these highlights as well. Let's zoom out, and that kind of just starts to tie things in. And we're going to do a bit more of that in a minute with the teeth, but for now that's pretty good. Coming back to this layer here, the area over the eyes, which was our original. Yep, there we go. So on this layer here, I'm going to grab my burn tool, go back to midtones, and just create a little darker area for our eye socket. And the same with this bit here. Even come into the highlights and just stamp away. Okay, and then let's zoom out. So still just a bit too much in here. Okay, that's a bit better. Okay, let's zoom in on the nose again. I think if the smoke's going to come around the nose, before it turns up, there's going to be a bit that's going to break off just here. So I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to move it down. Just flick it. Looks good. Eraser. And I'm going to get rid of these bits here. Duplicate it just so I can see where it's coming off. Brilliant. Gonna merge all of those three. Oh, no I'm not. That's gonna take the cutout areas as well. Actually I think it's alright as it is. Yep, that's looking pretty good. Right, we're gonna work on the top half now of the skull. And like I said, we need smoke 3, which is this one right here. And to work with smoke 3, we need to desaturate it, Command-Shift-U on the keyboard, and then V, and we're just going to drag that straight onto our document, up at the top somewhere, and we're going to call this New Smoke, and move that right to the top of our stack. Set that blend mode to screen, and that gets rid of the black for us, and then we're going to warp and bend this so that we can see it breaking away from the top of the skull. So we're going to need to scale this, so Command T, lock it, the ratio, and just bring that down a touch, and then start to rotate it. It's going to come off this side bit of our skull. Yeah, something like that looks pretty good. Let's have a look. Let's just zoom in a bit more on our skull. Okay, I'm going to O on the keyboard, bring up our burn, set it to midtones, get rid of this hard edge. Okay, and let's have a look. If the skull's going to be like, the smoke's going to be breaking over, we're not going to need this stuff in here too much, this middle ground stuff. Okay, so it's coming around the side of the skull and then breaking up. And we're going to create a bigger like plume of smoke at the top. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to kill some of these highlights. Oops, not the pen tool. Okay, and I'm going to kill out this area here. Or blend it out, sorry. And get rid of those highlights. Okay. Right, now once we've done that, we're going to create the other side. We're going to create this right hand side. And again, we're going to use exactly the same image, just flip it over. So I'm going to bring in the image again. I could have created a smart image previously, but that's the last time I'm going to need that, so I can minimize it. Command T, transform, lock the ratio, and just bring that down in size. And I'm going to flip that horizontally, rotate it, set the blend mode to screen again, and then think about how we're going to position this last little bit. And it just needs to be a little bit bigger, like so. And we don't need to worry about keeping with the shape of the head too much. So that looks pretty good. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And let's just rotate it a touch. like so. Okay, then we're going to go back in and we're going to get rid of the midtones. Going to come through this just a little bit, take some of that white heat out of it. And then I'm going to erase these little bits that we really don't need. Okay, and after you erase, go back to your midtones and just give that a clean up, whatever you've erased. Okay, it looks pretty good. It's still a little bit harsh on the white, so on the highlights, I'm going to just bring down the opacity and just make sure we take some of that white here out again. Okay, so it's starting to take shape. Let's have a look. Yep, that's looking pretty good. Next thing we need to do is add all the little bits of smoke around our image, and like almost the fill smoke. So go to our last smoke stock, V on the keyboard, and this time we're not going to bring in the whole image. So I'm just going to move that out of the way for a second, and let's zoom out. We're going to think about where we want to put these bits of smoke, what effect they're going to have on the image. So we might have some breaking out from the side here, a load at the top, a little bit here, and a lot just filling in these areas. So I'm going to work on the left side. So I'm going to zoom in on our stock, and I'm going to take this area down here. So I'm going to grab the selection, just come in roughly, grab it, V on the keyboard, set it to screen, and I'm going to move that over and just play around with how I want the kind of smoke to come up the side. Maybe could be a little bit big. Let's bring it down. That looks pretty good. O, back to on the keyboard, back to our burn tool and dodge tool. Set the midtones 23, bring that up a little bit, and we're going to zoom in and see if there's any hard edges that we need to get rid of. Okay, then we're going to work up the side part of our image, and if we come down here and turn our skull off, we can start to see the kind of shape that we're starting to get. Okay, so only this left hand side. Just going to grab this area up here. Again, set it to screen. And that looks okay to me. O again on our keyboard, and get rid of these harsh edges. Okay. Nice little wafts of smoke around. Let's do this top part now. drag that on, set it to screen. Bring that right down. And again, let's just dodge out the harsh lines. Get rid of that guide. Okay. Bring our exposure down. Give this middle area a little. Okay, and I'm just going to play around with its position a little bit more. Okay. Now, what we're doing there is just, I'm looking at these little details, these little flicks. I'm not worried about this middle part, just a little end bit here coming off. Maybe a little bit of the right, this little line coming round, the bottom of the chin just coming out. And let me just work on that. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of, with our eraser tool, this area in the middle. So I'm not overly worried about that just for now. And even this area can just be tucked in. Now when we go back, I'm going to use the whole of this side bit here. Bring that in, set it to screen, transform that, move that over the side of the face, like so, hit enter, and then again get rid of these edges, these lovely harsh edges. Okay, and the right hand side, I'm going to take the exact same layer, stick it on, transform it, flip it horizontally, scale that down, flip it vertically, and I might just put that there. Set it to screen, and again you're just looking for the little details, little flicks coming out. O on the keyboard, and let's get rid of these harsh edges. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and clean up. I've just got a couple of hard edges there that I missed out. I'm going to go back and clean those up. I'm not going to add any more. I think that's enough for now. I might just on some of these layers just bring down the opacity just a touch, so they just kind of highlight these areas of smoke coming out. And then once I've done that, we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so all I've done there is gone back, haven't changed much at all, and I've just basically got rid of, there were some harsh lines, harsh straight lines going on in here. Now I'm going to create a little bit of connection smoke between the chin and our cigarette, so I'm going to use a bit of selection, maybe this little bit over here. Set that to screen, and again let's burn out, dodge out the really harsh edges. Okay, I'm going to duplicate that, flip it, and then erase this part that's not quite needed, and then burn the rest a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Right, next thing we need to do is grab all of these smoke layers, so everything above our skull, so down to here. I'm going to stick them all into a group. I'm going to duplicate that group, turn that eye off, and Command D or Control E, and that's going to merge them all onto one layer. And we need to set that layer to screen. Okay, that way we've always got a backup of each individual layer that we needed, but we don't need to see that just yet. We just need to have our screen on, our skull copy. Okay, let's move on to the next stage now. So once we've hidden all of our smoke layers, we should just have our skull left. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the eraser, and we're going to remove some of these glowing edges right around our image. So just using the eraser tool, we're going to come in, soft brush, just get rid of lightly, make sure you're on the skull layer, these little edges that kind of shape the skull. Going to bring the opacity down just a little bit so I don't take everything. Okay. And then we're going to turn all our smoke layers back on. Make sure you've got the skull selected. We're going to play around with our levels. So I'm just going to come back to our skull layer. We've got that selected. And we're going to go to Image, Adjustment, Levels. Or we've got them over here actually. You can just double click on them. And then we're going to set it to 19, 0.60, and then 223. And click on OK. Let's just zoom out a bit. Okay, so that's taken out those kind of edges around the side of our jawline and kind of makes the eye kind of make up the shapes for us. So, okay, once you've done that, we've played around with that. we need to play around with some of the details. So we're going to use some parts of smoke 2 and 3, and I'll show you those in a second. And we're going to get these wisps of smoke that we got earlier on our nose and the eye area. We're going to get some of these to come off our teeth area here. So I'm just going to load up some of that. And this time I'm just going to grab a selection and just think about, we'll try to think about which bits we could use. Just catching that bit there, but that's probably not strong enough. So again, we're going to come back, grab a different selection. Just try that instead. Set that to screen. Rotate it a bit. Okay, grab my eraser tool. Get rid of some of the midtones. And just nudge that down a little bit more. Okay, and then we're going to keep on adding. So I'm going to load up the other smoke layers that we used. Okay. Just looking at them, thinking about what might be useful for, off the tooth just coming up. Maybe grab that area. Set that to screen. Okay. Get rid of any harsh edges. And that's all going to add to our final image. Looks pretty good. I think on our skull layer, what I'm going to do is it's a little bit, the nose area is a little bit bright. So in my midtones, I'm going to bring this right down. I'm just going to take a little bit out of our skull, come down to highlights again. Just a little bit too bright, some of that area. This area here too got picked up a little bit too much. Okay, let's zoom out and have a look. That looks pretty good. And obviously the more time you spend on those details around the teeth breaking off, the better the overall effect is, but I just haven't got the time to go through every single little bit of detail, and I'm sure you're not going to be just applying this to this image, you're going to do it to other ones as well. So once we've done that, we need to start applying some effects to the overall image and to our actual smoker himself. So select that layer, our background layer, let's open that up, double click on it, click on OK. We're going to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Curves. And we're going to set the curves so we're somewhere over here. Yeah, so around 67 by output of 179. Oh, wrong way around, sorry. So 67 and the output of 179. And click on OK. So he's nice and bright. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab this layer here and we're going to fill this with black. So it hasn't actually taken effect. And then we're going to use a white brush to bring that out. So head over to our brush, change it to white. We just need a soft brush. And if I just bring it all back, you can see it's going to be far, far too strong. So I'm going to set my brush to an opacity really low, maybe 18. Somewhere around there. 100% flow, nice soft brush. And I'm going to zoom in to our eye, back to my brush. Just to bring back this area here. Like so. Okay. What I didn't do is earlier I didn't set that layer so that it only applied to these two layers. So if we just zoom out, that's just had an effect on the cigarette and this guy. And again, it's a good thing about the layers, having a new adjustment layer, is if you want to have it so that it's masking, it's clipping to the other layers, you can. And you just press Alt, click in between them, and it'll apply it. Okay, so we've got that set up. Let's come down to some of these other areas, these lighter areas, with our brush tool. Really, really low opacity up there. And we'll just lighten up these areas around here, just so we're going to create a better contrast. Make sure we're on the right layer. Okay. That neck looks horrible, but I think I've got most of the bits that we need. Yep, that looks pretty good. Okay, once we've done that, we're going to go back to another layer adjustment and we're going to do levels. So layer, new layer adjustment, levels, and let's set them to 4 this time, 1.30 and 196. Click on OK. And then we're going to do a layer, new adjustment layer, gradient overlay or gradient map. And hopefully I've got mine preset down here. Yep, I do. So I'm just going to show you what those colors are. We have starting color of OE, and the finishing color we've gone for FE9C. Click on OK, click on OK, and click on OK. Set that layer to color, and what we're going to do is fill that mask black, and then in actual fact, let's undo that, fill it with white again, zoom out. Right, that gradient overlay should have been applied to everything. So I'm going to drag it all the way to the top of the stack, like so. Then in the white area, I'm going to paint with black with my brush, just increase the opacity a little bit, and we're going to paint back over our skin. And again, depends on the kind of look that you're going for. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, I'm going to go back into my colour fix here, back down to the smoker colour, just double checking that colour is 003949. Click on OK. I think I got that wrong at the start, and then click on OK, and OK. We just didn't have that first blue colour. So there we go, there's our skeleton coming through. Our skin still needs a bit of work, so back onto that layer, white brush, black brush, sorry, and bring back a little bit more of that skin. Okay, let's have a look. I think it looks pretty good. Again, you can play with the different opacity levels of your skull. You can bring it right down, so it's just coming through. But I'm pretty happy with that. So thanks for watching. That's a tutorial from James. Really cool, manipulating smoke to create hyper-real images. And his final image is far better than mine, but I think he spent a little bit more time on it than I have. But really, really great tutorial, and I've been waiting for one like this for a long time. So thanks very much, James, and thanks PSD Tuts, and I hope you check out all the other tutorials and videos over at the site. Thanks again, I'm Gavin Steele, and goodbye.